everyone, this is the slideshow video for the Quality of Life Affirmative #1 readings. And I want to mention here at the beginning, for those of you that are still watching the videos, that for these debates, I'm going to allow you to kind of develop your own advantages. I will cover the main advantages and disadvantages. But if there's something that sort of is related or spins off of these issues, for instance, in some of our readings, they mention cyberbullying. It's not really a focus of the readings, but you could turn that into a cyberbullying disadvantage. At this point, I think we're all familiar enough with debate, and since these are quality of life issues, that is kind of how does it affect your daily life, I think we can all debate them, even if we're not developing our own, even if it's not directly from the class readings. So that's open to you. You'll still need to tell the other team what that advantage or disadvantage is, and you might need to give them more details if it's something that's not directly from the readings, but I'm going to leave that opportunity open for you. So in these readings, I think there's mainly kind of 3 advantages, but potentially 4, because you could kind of split some of these up. So we'll talk about the Schmidt and Cohen readings first. The first one's a personalization advantage. Basically the idea is that we get like so many options to entertain ourselves, to educate ourselves, to connect with one another. We can curate our life stories via blogs or scrapbooks or our social media. We get endless entertainment options, and we can form our own playlists and customize or personalize that way. Schmidt and Cohen talk about this gives us more agency, right? We get more control over our own choices. You imagine kind of before digital media, and there was 10 TV stations, and those stations only aired programs at a certain time, so you didn't have much agency as far as like when to watch it and what you wanted to watch. And now we have a lot more agency. It's easier to assemble teams or groups of people. For instance, right now I'm in a watch group where we're watching a show together, some old college friends of mine, and talking about it on Facebook. And there's all kinds of fan groups like that, or different hobbies or things like that. Now remember, I think with this personalization advantage, it's going to be important for you to impact these things. Like, why does this matter? Why does having this entertainment matter? Why does having this agency matter? You could potentially connect it to mental health. It's better for our mental health when we have free time and leisure time, and we're enjoying those times. And I think just in general, agency is one of the things that's mentioned in like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Is that we all want to have a sense of agency, and so with these abilities of digital media, we gain more agency, and therefore it sort of makes our lives better. More immersive entertainment as well, things like video games and virtual reality, etc. The second advantage from Schmidt and Cohen, and obviously the biggest part of the reading, is the health advantage. I think this is a really strong affirmative advantage, and basically the benefits of digital technology in a lot of different ways for health and our health system. So we'll get new technologies that are better at detection and better at treatment. They mentioned having like little robots in our bloodstream that can monitor our hearts, and nanotechnology for new surgeries and stuff. Wider access to health. People in rural areas, people without as much money can do virtual health meetings with doctors instead. So that's a big advantage. They talk about the mobile health revolution, that is, in the third world in particular, but also in rural areas, that we can have, like mobile vans that have the medical equipment has gotten so miniaturized that they can go to these areas and provide healthcare and provide vaccinations and that kind of thing, which again spreads access to healthcare. Health testing apps, so things like Fitbit and other health monitoring apps can help improve people's fitness, encourage them, and motivate them. Um, for each of these points, especially this one, you'll probably have to supplement it with some outside research because a lot of these apps have emerged since the time this reading was published. Benefits in genetic testing, which might help you know whether you're susceptible to a new disease, detect it early, etc. And then just digital records, right? If a doctor can you move somewhere and a doctor can send your records to the new doctor very easily, then that potentially improves the quality of your health care. Obviously, again, you need to impact this advantage. I think, if your point talks about obesity, then one way to impact that is tell us how many people die or suffer from obesity. If it talks about heart disease, the same thing. But you can also, just talk about the importance of health in general, right? We have that sort of cliche that at least you have your health, right? Or that health is the most important thing. And I think that can make a strong impact to a health advantage. The next advantage, or potentially two advantages here, is from the Rainey reading, the networked individualism. And basically the idea here is that with social networks that we're getting kind of new forms of community. And they call it networked individualism because the individual is still at the center of these new forms of community, right? Like you're at the center of your kind of community on your social media page. But instead of being like geographically bound, like your neighborhood, or just interest bound, like I'm in a community that goes to this church, or I'm in a community that's into this hobby, we have networks, right? So they're made up of much bigger groups of people, including strong ties and weak ties across different interests, across different locations, etc. And they're arguing that some people claim, and we might make this as a negative argument, that technology is isolating, right? That we all stare at our phones and we don't interact with one another anymore. And they're saying, no, actually, we use technology to be social. And the people who are making this argument that technology is isolating are just sort of old fuddy-duddies who are worried about new technology. So we become networked individuals with us at the center of these large social networks. And these networks provide advice and resources and aid. The story at the beginning of the reading about, I think her name is Trudy, who gets in an injury and is in the hospital, and her husband has to spend time in the hospital, and they use their network to get advice, to have people help them take care of their house, to bring them food, etc. Right? Having access to a bigger network makes that makes us have more resources because maybe if you were in a small community, a neighborhood community, maybe you don't know a doctor, maybe you don't know a lawyer, but on your networks, chances are that you know someone like that. And maybe your small community is pretty poor, but with a network you can fundraise and reach out to other communities and do like GoFundMe's and stuff like that, which can be very valuable as well. One of the big benefits of these networks is that they're more diverse. Typically, like if you're in a community that's based on a neighborhood or a church, there's going to be a lot of homogeneity in those communities. Whereas if you have a network, you're going to be much more connected to different professions, different people from different walks of life, different classes, different races, different genders, etc. And that gives us more ways to solve problems. To continue, in other words, we have more relations at our fingertips. In general, I think this allows us to have more social opportunities. And those social opportunities not only provide us with resources and emotional support and all those things, but also are just key to our mental health in general, right? Maybe you feel this because of the pandemic, that we're social beings, and when we don't have social relationships, it would be pretty draining on our mental health. In fact, imagine if there were no digital media and we were in the pandemic, how much worse this would all be. They do admit in the reading that this requires more effort. You think about the time you spend on your social media, the time you spend texting, etc. Um, it requires effort to maintain these networks, um, but the payoff is worthwhile. People can become their own publishers and their own broadcasters. Maybe this could be a separate advantage itself. Giving people the chance to be creative, right? I can make music and post it on YouTube. I can make arts and crafts and sell them on Etsy, et cetera, right? And creativity and having a creative outlet again can be impacted with mental health. These networks allow us to stay connected to people from the past or people from across a long distance, like friends from high school who moved away, that kind of thing. And in general, just gives us new forms of community building, right? We can form communities around shared interest instead of around going to the same church or going or living in the same neighborhood. We can form communities around all sorts of different niches and interests that maybe it was harder to form before. They have a lot of answers to the isolation disadvantage, the idea that technology isolates us instead of connecting us. They say it assumes people live different virtual lives distinct from the real world, when actually online and offline world lives are intertwined. That is that when we're interacting online, that is our real life. So it's not isolating. We're interacting. We're being social. It presumes or assumes that the in-person contact is the only meaningful form, when actually we can have meaningful contact online or via devices. It believes the internet is worse because it lacks social cues like facial expression, gesture. And they say, but people mostly interact with familiar people online. That is, we know those people already, so we kind of know how to read their social cues. Also, things like Zoom, I think, answer this point. And this argument confuses the medium with the message. People don't confuse their screen with the person on the other end, right? We use our screens to connect to the person on the other end. And they basically kind of indict the people making these criticisms. They say, they're kind of glorifying the past as if there were all these great communities in the past. And their observation of other individuals is pretty superficial. They see people staring at a screen in a park and think they're so lonely, when actually, they're involved in something very social and enjoyable. There could be a separate families or relationships advantage here at the end of the reading. There's a bunch of good evidence for this. They talk about helping keep in touch with spouses and loved ones, sending messages, or lovers, sending messages throughout the day, organizing our lives a little bit, saying, oh, who's going to pick up the kids, or who's going to get milk on the way home, those kinds of things. So it saves us time. It helps strengthen our relationship with our spouses. Same thing with our children, right? We can connect with them and text with them throughout the day, make sure that they're okay, know more about what's going on with them, and strengthen relationships with children there. They talk about how this is particularly important for teens. And I remember this distinctly, kind of growing up, and all we had was a landline, right? All we had was a home phone. So if somebody wanted to call and I wanted to talk to them, there's a chance my sister might sneak onto the line and listen in on what's going on. Or there's a chance that I couldn't do that because other people were using the phone. But now each teen has a cell phone, and that gives them sort of access to a social world, right? I remember growing up, it was oftentimes hard for us to find a place to go and things to do together because we didn't really have our own kind of private space. And social media and texting sort of gives teenagers a private space and helps them stay connected. And again, you can connect that to friendship and the importance of friendship for mental health. And then netting together. And this is maybe a way that it strengthens families, is, it gives us entertainment options to do together. We have Netflix shows we can watch. We have games we can play together, etc. And this also could be potentially for that personalization or entertainment advantage we covered earlier, could potentially be something to talk about as an impact to that, right? That all these entertainment options help keep families together and help give families something to do together. Some potential rebuttals, again, we'll cover these on our rebuttal day in more detail, but I'll do 1 or 2 points on each one of these. For the personalization advantage, I think one thing that you can talk about is there being too many options, right? And because entertainment is so available at our fingertips, um, maybe we end up spending too much time playing games and being entertained, etc., and not enough time, being educational or learning a hobby or those kinds of things. Um, I think you can also question the impact of this. Is like, how valuable is it really that we have thousands of TV stations? And maybe does it, again, too many choices, does it add stress to our lives because we have to juggle and we have so many options to juggle between? For the health advantage, I think there's some health disadvantages. Things like obesity because people are sitting too much. In fact, there are arguments or research out there that says that sitting a lot is as bad for your health as smoking or obesity. So maybe these devices encourage us to sit more and not exercise. There's also eye strain and harms to our sleep that happen with these things. And I think importantly, questioning the cost and the access of these new technologies, right? The main problem with our health system right now is that a bunch of people don't have health care or can't afford health care. So introducing like nanotechnology and laser surgery into the health system might have some small benefits for those people who are wealthy enough, but it doesn't really benefit the people who are the most sick and most need health care, etc. For the networked individualism points, obviously you can argue the opposite of this, that these devices are isolating. And there's good arguments for that out there. In particular, one person named Sherry Turkle, Turkle. If you want to look her up, in a book that she wrote called Alone Together. But she does a lot of interviews and stuff, so you can find some of her stuff about how technology is actually makes us feel like we're connecting with one another, but really is kind of isolating us as we stare at our screens and don't talk to one another face to face anymore. There's also arguments about how these things actually hurt community that way, right? That people know their neighbors less than they did before, that they have less personal kind of face-to-face connection than they did before. And then all of the, effects on relationships too. There's good evidence that Facebook, for instance, and Twitter and social media generates jealousy in relationships and makes it harder. I saw some statistic that like 2/3 of divorce proceedings mentioned Facebook in the divorce proceedings. So there's that, impact on relationships. There's, just like a time trade-off. Again, the entertainment options. We have so many options that maybe we're playing games and watching Netflix too much and not spending enough time with our kids and whatnot. Oftentimes today, for instance, parents will just stick an iPad in front of a young kid to keep them busy instead of interacting and playing with them one-on-one. So hopefully we can come up with some more rebuttals as on our rebuttal day, and I think we will be able to. But I wanted to give you a brief idea of some potential responses and an overview of the advantages from these readings. So have a good rest of your day.